Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to the afternoon class on high voltage. So we have last class we have discussed on high voltage cable. So there are some revision questions on that. We will go through all these few revision questions. and then we'll go to the new topic. Okay. So few questions, is very important questions from this cable topic, and discuss the various hazards. Okay, what are the hazards when there is a fire in the electrical cable insulations? That means which are associated, a fire which is associated with electrical cable insulations. What are the hazards? Okay, the main hazards are few of them, like heat release, flame spread, smoke production, acid gas production, and toxic gas production. We will discuss each one of them in brief, so that you can write for the exams also point of view. I'll make it very brief points. Okay. So what are the hazards associated with the electrical cable insulation fire? Heat release, as we know, like how much heat is released and how quickly is the single most important parameter which defines the hazard of material. So some of the heat released during the combustion is radiated back onto the fuel, and it affects the fire growth. So one is a heat release, and second one is the flame spread. So flame spread, the flame is spread occurs when there is a sufficient heat to sustain the polymer decomposition process. So you will have a flame spread. This is because of the polymer decomposition process. And you will have a smoke. Smoke is a result of incomplete combustion of the polymer fuel. The inflammability of the polymer or its ability to produce fumes is determined by its chemical combinations. Like rubber, when used for insulations, produces a dense, black, oily smoke and has some toxic qualities. So one is a heat release, one is a flame spread, and other one is the smoke production. Then we have acid gas production and toxic gas production. Acid gas production, the acid gas means is a gas which contains significant amount of acidic gases such as carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. So cable sheathing typically contains a halogen, that is bromine, iodine, and chlorine, which produces the toxic and corrosive products like hydrogen chloride during and after the fire. So smoke and soot toxicity and the potential effect on the shipboard materials and electrical component is also concerned. So we have acid gas production. This is because of the cable sheathing which contains halogen. So we will have an acid gas. And second thing is the toxic gas. Toxic gas means halogen-based flame retardants are widely used as a combustion inhibitors, and they are very effectively suppressing the ignition. However, these flame retardant materials are exposed to severe or prolonged fire enough to cause them burn, then the corrosive and irritant halogen acids are produced. So these toxic gas productions are like carbon monoxide, chlorine, nitrogen dioxide. So these are the 5 hazards related to the fire on the electrical cable insulations: heat release, flame spread, smoke production, acid gas production, toxic gas production. Okay, so this answer you may not find in your handouts directly, but these are the answers. The 5 points you have to write: heat release, flame spread, smoke production, acid gas, and toxic gas. The other one is, in the same question, there says that suggest the remedies for these problems. That is, cable having EPR, ethylene propylene rubber insulation with necessary sheathing of polycarbonate or chlorosulfonated polythene, PCP or CCP may be used to protect insulation against fire. Also, a galvanized armor may be used to protect insulation from fire. And the difference between fire retardant and fire resistant. You see, fire resistant means it is defined as the material that is inherently resisting to catching the fire and does not melt or drip when exposed directly to extreme heat. One is fire resistant. So when there is a fire, this type of fire resistant cables which can withstand fire, it will not melt or it will not drip. That is called fire resistant. Whereas fire retardant means this has been chemically treated to self-extinguish. it is essential to distinguish the outer sheath color between the flame retardant cable and flame resistant cable. Fire resistant cables, you will find a red outer sheath. Most of the fire resistant cables are having a red outer sheath, and retardant may be gray or black outer sheath. Here you can see one cable. This is a fire resistant cable here. Now the insulation, you see the difference between this is that the insulation here used is cross-linked polyethylene. XLP insulation is being used. Okay. So fire retardants save the life and protect the property by helping to prevent fire from starting and spreading. That is fire retardant. Fire retardant means it will not encourage in spreading of the fire. It will try to basically prevent the fire from starting, also from spreading. It will not allow the fire to spread out. So retardant is defined as a material that has been chemically treated to self-extinguish. So fire retardant cables are not rated to continue to operate under fire circumstances, but it will resist the propagation of the fire. That's the main thing. Fire retardant means it will resist to propagation of the fire, or it will not allow the fire to spread. And fire resistance means it will not catch fire basically, or it will not melt, or it will not drip. So fire resistant cable, which will continue to operate normally in the presence of a prolonged fire for a specified time under defined conditions. So fire resistant cable is applied to critical circuit, like which operates on energized to trip. Some critical circuits are there which has to trip, where we are using the fire resistant cables. Where fire retardant cable is applied to a circuit other than mentioned above, it serves the instrument loop which operates in fail-safe mode. So the things which are operating in a fail-safe, like whenever it fails, it goes to a safe mode. So there we use this fire retardant. And fire resistant means you need some equipment has to be immediately activated and tripped, or when there is a fire, it has to be tripped. So such places we are using a fire resistant cable. So fire resistant means it will resist the fire. It will not melt. It will not drip. Fire retardant means it will not spread the fire. So it will not allow the spread to spread out. So it is basically, you can say it like a self-extinguishing. And it will resist the propagation of the fire into the new areas by having a behavior in the fire under defined conditions. So this is a difference between fire retardant and fire resistant, or flame retardant. We say flame retardant and fire resistant. These both are two things. So fire resistant will resist the fire. It will not melt. It will not drip. Fire retard will not allow the fire to spread out. So this is again depend upon the material of construction, the insulation material which has been used. It depends upon that, whether it is a fire resistant. I've shown you one cable. This is a fire resistant cable. This is a fire resistant cable because we can see here, this is the parts of a cable. This is the conductor, which is the inside one, and the outside one is the insulation part. This insulation is called cross-link SLP insulations. Now state how the spread of a fire may be reduced by the method used for installing electrical cables. So state how the spread of fire, how you can, the spread of the fire can be reduced by using the installation of methods, how you are installing the cables. So the cable and wiring and the external to the equipment must have a fire retardant properties. On board ship, the cables what we are using is all fire retardant type, having a fire retardant properties. So basically they inhibit or they delay the spread of the fire by suppressing the chemical reactions in the flame. So how they retard this? Because of the suppressing the chemical reactions in the flame or by formation of a protective layer. And fire retardant basically save the life and protect the property by helping to prevent the fire from starting or from spreading. So what are the precautions or what are the methods we can reduce this fire? One is cable and wiring of emergency equipments. So what are the emergency equipments like lighting sections or communications, and they have to be kept away from like galley, laundries, machinery space category and other high risk areas. So this cable has to be separated, like communication cables, navigation equipment cables. They cannot be routed through these areas like galley and laundries, etc. They have to be routed separate. so that in case there is a galley fire comes, this cable does not get damaged and your critical equipments or emergency equipments should be affected. So that is one thing. So you have to keep the basically the equipments, emergency equipments like lighting systems, communications, those cablings are to be away from these places like galley, laundries, etc. Then special precautions are to be taken for cable insulation in hazardous areas, and it must lead to explosions. See, normally in the hazardous areas, all the cables are totally different cables. We don't use the normal cables in the hazardous areas. Those cables are specially classified for hazardous areas. Only such cable can be used in hazardous areas, so that there is no explosion threat or anything. So nothing should happen with this cable when there is a short circuit, etc. Second thing, terminations and joints to be made in such a manner that it should retain its original fire resisting properties. As you can understand, that's basically termination. That is in the, like, whether it is a junction box or whether it is a joint, this has to retain its original fire resisting properties. Avoid cable damage and chafing. So damage of the cable, that is the main cause of a short circuit. So cable should not get damaged. It has to be protected. And fireproof glands to be used in case of cable passing through the bulkheads. So the cable glands has to be fireproof. So these are the few methods, maybe some more with this methods, so that the spread of the fire can be reduced by installing the cables. Okay. So hope you understood fire retarding, flame retarding, and fire resistance. What is flame retardant cable? What is fire resistant cable? Both are two different things. And next is, with respect to the marine cables, explain the different temperature and insulation classes. So this is from your handouts. This is also important question. Class A insulation, what is the maximum temperature? What are the materials used for Class A insulations? Class B, so Class A insulations like cotton, silk, paper, etc., which suitably impregnated or coated or when immersed in dielectric liquids such as oil. Class B is 130 degrees centigrade, and this is basically mica, glass, and fiber. Class C is 120 degrees centigrade. This is a combination of materials which by experience or accepted test can reveal their capabilities. Class F insulation is very important. We are generally using Class F. They are basically mica, glass, and fiber. And Class H is 180 degrees. They are using silicon, elastomer, mica, glass, fiber. So generally, like a kitchen and all in the galley, you can see cooking range cables, etc. We are using this silicon type cables which can withstand up to 180 degrees centigrade to 200 degrees centigrade. So these are the various classes of insulation and the temperature limits. Then with respect to marine grade cables, explain commonly used insulating materials. So commonly used insulation, you have seen it. First is the conductor, then is the insulation. Okay, so in this diagram, you can see what is insulation. You see this one is the insulation. This one is the insulation part. So this is the conductor, this is the insulation. The outer one is the insulation. So what are the materials you use for insulation? Just I mentioned only few of them, 4 of them. Silicon rubber, XLP, this is a cross-linked polythene, and ethylene propylene rubber, butyl rubber. Generally on board ship you are using this 4 of them. And just a small brief introduction on this, because with respect to marine grade cables, explain. Its question is explain. It's not listing. So you have to write what is silicon rubber. Just 2-3 lines about this. And silicon rubber insulation is suitable for extreme high and low temperatures. You will find this type of cables, silicon rubber, it's having a pink color insulation on that. And as I told you, it is generally used for the galley equipments. It has got a good resistance to oils, gasoline, and some acids. Tin copper conductor minimizes the corrosion in marine environment. Silicon rubber insulation does not release corrosive gases when ignited. And silicon rubber insulated cables having an outstanding temperature range for high temperature up to 200 degrees centigrade and low up to -90 degrees centigrade. So this is more very flexible cable. It is used, the color is around pink color. It can withstand up to 200 degrees centigrade. It is used in galley appliances or galley equipments, cooking range, etc., where we need a high temperature. We are using insulation silicon. As I told you, insulation means It is after the conductor, next part is the insulation. That is the silicon rubber. It is flexible cable. Like hot plates, you see, if you see the hot plates, they are using this type of cables, silicon rubber cables. Then we have the XLP cables, that is cross-linked polythene. This is a chemical process by which they make this. It is a cross-linking polymer. It's a process which changes the molecular structure of the polymer chains so that they are more tightly bound together. And this cross-linking is done either by chemical means or physical means. It is suitable for high voltage ranges from low to extra high voltage, surpassing other insulation materials such as PVC. PVC we don't use on board ship. EPR we are using, and this silicon rubber also we are using. So cross-linking the polythene also enhances the chemical and oil resistance at an elevated temperature and makes it suitable for low smoke, zero halogen material. So this is another type of polymer. It is cross-linking polymer. Okay, this is it's all chemical process by which you make this, adding some additives and make this to cross-link polythene. And this is used for high voltage cables also. Then the EPR is generally used. We are using for other purposes on board ship. EPR is used for insulation material for electrical cables due to the high dielectric strength, but it is also used as a sheathing material, exhibit excellent zone and weathering distance. So normal cables which you find in engine rooms and all motors, etc., you'll find these EPR insulations. And butyl rubber, which is a tough and resilient, has a good heat and ozone and moisture resistant. These excellent properties enable butyl rubber to replace natural rubber as an insulating material. Butyl rubber, which is generally and preferably used in copolymer, is 97 to 99% of the isobutane, 13% of the isoprene. So this is a combination of this. So it is distinguished by the superior resistance to ozone and water as well as electrical properties. So these are the four type of insulating material what we use: silicon rubber, cross-linked polyethylene, EPR, ethylene propylene rubber, and butyl rubber. Okay, so this is the answer to these questions. With respect to marine grade cables, explain commonly used insulating material. You have to mention these four of them, write few words what it is: silicon rubber, what is XLP, what is EPR, and what are the various applications. Okay. Then with respect to marine grade cables, explain the sheathing. What is sheathing? You can see here. First is the conductor, then the insulation. The outer, this one is called the sheath. The purpose of this one is only a protection. The sheath of a cable will protect the insulation from damage and injury, but it is not classified as an insulating material. It is only for protection, this sheath. And sheath materials required to be heat, oil, chemical resistant, and it should be flame retardant also. Sheath must also be tough and flexible. PCP, that is polychloroprene or neoprene, is a common sheath material. So this is the sheathing part. So with respect to marine grade cables, explain sheathing of electrical cables. Okay, so why we need a sheathing? The purpose of the sheathing is to protect the cable from damage, like bending, etc. This will protect against damage. And what are the materials we use? Generally, we use PCP. And this is the insulation part. This we have seen various type of insulations like XLP, butyl rubber, EPR, etc. We are using as insulation, and sheathing is this one for protection of the cable is called the sheathing part. Okay, so this is about this cable revision questions. So I have told you all these four questions in this. First is various hazards associated with the, in case of a electrical fire, what are the hazards associated with the electrical cable insulation? Then what are the remedies? Then difference between fire retardant and fire resistant, flame retardant and fire resistant cables. Then how the spread of a fire can be reduced by installing the electrical cables. Then temperatures and insulation classes of the cables. And what are the commonly used insulating materials? Very important question: silicon rubber, XLP, ethylene propyl rubber, butyl rubber. Then what is sheathing? Why we need sheathing? What is the purpose of sheathing? What are the sheathing materials used? Okay. With this, the cable part finished. And then we will go to the next topic. Next topic is on the fuses. Okay. I think yesterday we have finished the high voltage class on high voltage cables. So today we'll switch over to the high voltage fuses. So we'll this topic, though it is fuses, there are a lot of informations on the fuses. Probably we on board ship and all practical applications. Most of the times we are confused with the fuse. Like what should be the fuse ratings? When you say voltage ratings, ampere ratings, and all, which fuse you should use. So can we use a circuit of like if the circuit is say 32 volt 15 amps fuse? Can you use a 250 volt 10 amps fuse? Or if it is 230 volt 15 amps fuse, can you use a 120 volt 10 amps fuse? So there are a lot of confusion in that. We will see there are some basic things also I will cover up in this so that we have a good idea about the fuse. Okay, how to handle with this fuse. So as we know, like what is a fuse? Fuse or an electrical fuse, it's an electronic device that basically protect a circuit from different electrical faults like overcurrent, overload and all, is it? So basically it is based on the heating effect of an electric current. And the simple fuse consists of some conducting material. As you know, the fuse is inside it's a conducting material which has got a low resistance and it is placed in a series with the circuit. So the cross-sectional area of the conducting material is designed such that it allows certain amount of current to permit to flow through the circuit.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, can you see?
Good afternoon. We cannot see the screen. Yes.
Wait, I'm just checking it. Can you see now? I think you can see it.
Yes. Yes, we can see. Yes.
So here, when the current in the circuit exceeds its permitted value, which may be due to the overload or maybe short circuit or maybe load mismatch, this excessive current will melt the conductive element in the fuse and open the circuit. That's what the fuse is doing it, is it? So let's see a few things in this. What are the characteristics of a fuse? The fuse characteristic should be, one is the ampere rating, melting time, voltage rating, and interruption rating, IR square I value of the fuse, packaging, temperature, etc. The current rating or the current capacity of a fuse will define the maximum amount of current a fuse can hold without blowing or melting. So one is current rating is very important. That specifies how much current the fuse can hold. Now, if you look at this, how a fuse is blowing. Now, when the current increases, what happened? The temperature will increase, is it? When the current increases, the temperature increases and the fuse melts. That's what happening. So, current rating or current capacity of a fuse defines a maximum amount of a current a fuse can hold without blowing or melting. This is usually mentioned in amperes like 2 amps, 4 amps and all. Along with the current rating, a fuse will also be specified with the maximum voltage it can be supplied. Like based on the voltage rating, fuses are again classified low voltage fuses, high voltage fuses. And another one is the I square. It's I square T. It is I square. Yeah, I square T value of a fuse measures the heat energy in the fuse. The heat energy is due to the current flow and also the arc produced when the fuse is blown. Breaking capacity of the fuse is known as the interruption rating or short circuit rating. Breaking capacity will specify the maximum safe current that can fuse can interrupt at a voltage less than the maximum rated voltage. Okay. Now, before we come to this, there are DC fuses also, there are AC fuses also. Main difference between DC fuse and AC fuse is that the size of the fuse. If you see in a DC circuit, the current exceeds the limit and the metallic wire in the fuse melts and disconnect the rest of the circuit from the power supply. Since DC is a constant value, it is always above 0 volt. There is a chance of electric arc between the melted wires, which will be difficult to avoid and turn off. Hence, usually the electrodes of the DC fuse are placed at a larger distance when compared with the AC fuse. That is the difference. The electrodes of the DC fuses are placed little larger distance when compared with the AC fuses. This will minimize the chances of arc. Since the distance between electrode is increased, the size of the DC fuse is also comparatively large. So you have a DC fuse and you have an AC fuse. Because DC fuse, the electrodes which is inside are placed little larger distance when compared with the AC fuse. When AC current oscillates between 50 to 60 times per second and its amplitude of the signal varies from minimum to maximum, at one point of oscillations, AC voltage will touch 0 volt, hence the arc between the melted electrodes can easily be terminated. Okay, so as a result, size of the AC fuse can be much smaller when compared with the DC fuse. Then we have high voltage fuses. High voltage fuses are generally used in power systems and typically rated voltage above 1500 to 13.8 kV. High voltage fuses are used to protect like transformers, small power transformers, instrument transformers, where circuit breakers must not give like guarantee protections. And high voltage fuses basically constructed using silver or copper, or sometimes tin is also used in order to provide a stable performance. In explosion type high voltage fuses, fuse link chamber is also filled with some boric acid. We will see this is in details in the coming class. Now, before we come to this, what are the benefits of a circuit breaker over a fuse? You see, the advantage of circuit fuse is always exposed. When you open a starter panel, you'll find fuse is exposed. Whereas circuit breaker is dead front. Circuit breaker, there is no live parts in the front side. So you're safe. So that means one advantage of circuit breaker, it is dead front. Dead front means no live parts in the front side, no live. Nothing is live. It is fully covered up. It is fully closed. So it is dead front. But fuses are exposed with the live parts. It is exposed. It is live. Everything is live. And circuit breaker can be tested for proper operation. You can test a circuit breaker, opening, closing, tripping, all you can test it with a circuit breaker, whereas a fuse, you can't do this. To truly test a fuse, it needs to be destroyed in the process. Basically, the fuse will get damaged. If you want to see if how the fuse is blowing or not, you have to give a higher current, because fuse is only based on the higher current. When the current increases, fuse blows off. And a fuse can arc if placed under the power. So there are some new busbar miniature circuit breaker systems. They are designed to have a breaker replaced under power, but adoption has not been widespread. So fuses can arc. That is another problem with the fuses. And the fuse does not offer magnetic protection. So fuse is a thermal protection. It will not give you a magnetic protection. It's only thermal. And this is dual trip curve feature of a circuit breaker makes them unique compared with the fuses. That's another advantage of circuit breaker. It's a magnetic protection. Fuse is a thermal protection. Circuit breakers has got external indications, whether it is open or closed, you have indications. Fuse, you have no indications. Some of the fuses has got whether it is blown indications. On top of the fuse, you'll have a indication which indicates the fuse is blown or not. So these are the benefits of a circuit breaker over a fuse. Okay. And a circuit breaker can be used like a switch. It can on and off many times. A blown fuse can easily be replaced with a wrong size or even a jerry jig, like creating a safety issue. So when it comes to this, suppose you have a fuse which is like 32 volt 15 amps fuse. Now, can you replace this fuse with a higher voltage but at the same current rating? Suppose you have a circuit, you have got a, let's say, 50 volt 10 amps fuse, and you want to replace that fuse, but you got a fuse now, let's say of 250 volt of 10 amps. So the voltage rating determines the amount of space or a gap left after the fuse is open, okay, and it's interrupted the flow of the current. So the higher the voltage rating, the larger the resulting gap will be there where the fuse open, and wider gap means lesser chance of sustaining and arcing. So that means you have a fuse. Suppose you are having a circuit where you have a 50 volt, let's say 10 amps fuse. This fuse is blown off. Now you want to replace this fuse, let's say with 250 volt 10 amps fuse. You can replace with a higher voltage, but the same current rating, you can replace it. But you cannot replace a fuse with a lesser voltage with the same current rating. Hope you understood this. When you replace a fuse, the voltage, suppose you have a replacement fuse, which voltage should not be less than the initial one. It has to be more than that. It should not be lesser. So a circuit breaker can be used on-off switch. A blown fuse can be easily replaced, but you have to be careful with the voltage as well as the current. The current rating has to be the same, but the voltage can be higher, but it should not be lesser. Then startup tripping is, I'll just show you another one slide about this fuse replacement voltage. Voltage rating it is coming. So I'll show you what is the necessity and why you have to be careful with this fuse voltage rating. Starting up tripping is an issue with fuses. Fuses can require longer wiring to compensate for the inrush current. So needs to oversize the fuse for the inrush current. Startup tripping is an issue with the fuses. And circuit breaker can provide ground fault protections. So fuse cannot give you a ground fault protections. Fuse age and degrade over the time, which can cause nuisance tripping. So age and it can get degraded after a long time. Single phasing on three-phase loads does not happen with a three-phase pole breaker. All circuit trips at once. Using individual fuses for a three-phase power can result single phasing. You see, in a breaker, once the breaker trips, it open the three contacts altogether. But if you have a three fuses for a three-phase supply, if one fuse blows off, it becomes a single phasing. So this is one dangerous situation. Whenever you use a three-phase supply, if one fuse blows, it becomes single phasing. In case of a breaker, it doesn't happen. It trips all the three phases. Now, benefit of the fuse over the circuit breaker. Fuses are simple and straightforward to use. It trips faster than a circuit breaker. And the fuses are initially less expensive than circuit breaker. It has smaller footprint and a control cabinet. And there are variety of fuses for different applications. Fuses can be more reliable over time because they do not have a moving parts. That's main important. If there's no moving parts, so it's more reliable. It doesn't require in maintenance. And it is replaced every time after overcurrent trip. So the same level of circuit protection performance is guaranteed. The fuses has got the fuses are characterized by thermal and interrupting characteristic. So what is this thermal characteristic? Thermal characteristic means it's the current rating and the melting characteristic. And interrupting characteristic means it's the voltage rating and the interruption rating. That is the interrupting characteristic. So we will see this. What is this thermal characteristic? You see, as the magnitude of the current is increasing, suppose fuse is there and the current is increasing, the current which is flowing is increasing. So what will happen? When the current is increasing, larger the magnitude of the current increase, magnitude of the current becomes more, that will lead to higher power dissipation. When the current increases, there will be more power dissipation in the fuse. Hence, what happened? There will be a rise in the temperature of the element. The fuse element will start heating up more. The melting time of the fuse should be inversely proportional to the magnitude of the square of the current. The relationship between magnitude of the current that causes melting and the time needed for it to melt is given by the fuse melting time and current characteristic. So that means when the overcurrent in a smaller magnitude, suppose the overcurrent is smaller magnitude, rate of heat generated in the element is also very low. So as a consequence, temperature of the element increases very gradually. Now, as the current increases, melting time will reduce. See, as the current is increasing, what will happen? The melting time reduces at a rate which is more than the expected increase in the rate of heat generation. This is because heat which is generated in reduced cross-section or center element cannot be removed as fast as it is produced. This gives a fuse an inverse characteristic. So what do you understand from this? As the magnitude of the current is increasing, what happens? Current increases, the melting time will reduce. Okay. As the large current is flowing, so melting time is reduced. So larger magnitude of the current will lead to higher power dissipations, because power dissipation, the more current is flowing, so power dissipation becomes higher. And faster rise in the temperature of the element. The temperature element will increase. So melting time of the fuse should be inversely proportional to the magnitude of the square of the current. Melting time of the fuse should be inversely proportional to the magnitude of square of the current. So larger magnitude of the current, higher power dissipation, the fuse element will start getting heated up fast. So fast rise in the temperature of the element and melting time of the fuse should be inversely proportional to magnitude of the square of the current. So when the overcurrent is small, suppose the current is less, then rate of heat generated in the element is also less. Overcurrent is small and the rate of heat generated in the element is also low. So the temperature of the element increases gradually. But if the current increases, melting time reduces at a rate which is more than the expected rate, because the heat which is generated in the reduced cross section or center of the element cannot be removed as fast it is produced. This gives a fuse an inverse characteristic. So that is why it has got an inverse characteristic. So hope you understood how this thing is working. So when you have a very large current is flowing, power dissipation becomes very high. So the melting time is reduced. So melting time of the fuse is inversely proportional to magnitude of the current. Okay. So when large current is flowing, higher power dissipation, melting time is reduced. So melting time of the fuse is inversely proportional to the square of the current. Okay. So this is an inverse characteristic. Now the voltage rating. You see the voltage rating, power apparatus and system contain inductive elements also. So hence what happened, melting of a fuse element is not sufficient to interrupt the current. Suppose the fuse element is melted and it is not enough, because when you have an inductive elements in that, that means when you have some reactive type load, so melting the fuse element is not sufficient enough to interrupt the current. So there is always some period of arcing before the current is interrupted. So voltage rating of a fuse must be at least equal to or greater than the circuit voltage. This is very important. The voltage rating of the fuse should be at least equal or more than the circuit voltage. It can be higher, but it can never be lower. Because of this inductive component, what happens? The voltage rating determines the amount of the space or a gap left after the fuse opened and interrupted the flow of the current. Because of this inductive component, there can be some arcing can take place after interruption of the current also. After the interruption of the current, there can be some arcing because of these inductive elements in the circuit. So the voltage rating of the fuse must be equal or greater than the circuit voltage. It can be higher, but it can never be lower. That means if you have a 600 volt fuse, 600 volt fuse can be used in 280 volt circuit. The voltage rating of a fuse is a function of its capability to open a circuit under overcurrent conditions, and especially the voltage ratings determines the ability of the fuse to suppress internal arcing. So that is the significance of this voltage rating. The voltage rating of a fuse will determine the ability of the fuse to suppress the internal arcing. And that occurs, the internal arcing occurs after a fuse link melt and an arc is produced. So if a fuse is used with a voltage rating lower than the circuit voltage, an arc suppression will be impaired. That means if you have got a fuse with a lower, you are using a fuse with a lower voltage rating and the current is interrupted, but there will be an arcing inside the fuse because of the inductive type load, and that can damage the whole circuits because this arc. So what this voltage rating specifies is that how much is the electrode gap inside the fuse. The higher voltage means little more gap. So the arc cannot take place. If it is at a higher voltage, the arc cannot take place. Lower voltage, when the current is interrupted, there can be an arc because of these inductive type elements. And if the voltage rating is, as I told you, the voltage rating determines what is the gap in the electrodes inside of the fuse. Higher the voltage, more gap. Less voltage, the gap is less. So when the current is interrupted, there can be an arc because of this inductive type elements, and this arc can cause damage to the circuits. Okay. So the voltage rating of a fuse must be equal or greater than the circuit voltage. So as I told you, like if you have a fuse, suppose you are using a fuse of 32 volt 15 amps, and now you find that the fuse is blown. So you found another one fuse. So fuse, let's say that fuse is having, let's say 24 volt and 10 amps. That means that you cannot change it. You can use a much higher voltage, but you cannot put a lower voltage fuse with the same current settings, current value or current ratings. So the voltage rating of the fuse must be equal or greater than the circuit voltage. It can be higher, but it cannot be lower. That means 600 volt fuse can be used in a 208 volt circuit, but you cannot use a 208 volts fuse in a 600 volt circuit. This is because of the arcing. So voltage rating of a fuse is a function of its capability to open a circuit under overcurrent conditions, and the voltage rating determines ability of the fuse to suppress the internal arcing. That's a very important. Voltage ratings will decide, it will suppress the internal arcing, and that occurs after the fuse link melt and an arc is produced. If the fuse is used with voltage rating lower than the circuit voltage, arc suppression will be impaired. As I told you, because the voltage rating again depends upon the electrode gap. Higher the voltage, more gap. Lesser the voltage, lesser the gap. So whenever you select any fuse on board ship, suppose you find one fuse as blown, you can use the same voltage or you can use a higher voltage, but you should never use a fuse, a replacement fuse over lower voltage. Current rating definitely has to be same. If the one fuse is blown of 10 amps, you should replace a fuse with 10 amps only. But voltage, you can use a higher one, but you cannot use a lower one. That's what I mean to say. How the fuses are rated? Fuses are rated by current, voltage, and breaking capacities. Okay, and whether they're designed to operate on AC and DC. There's two different AC fuses and DC fuses. So the current rating of a fuse is the current that can carry for a definite time periods without opening. Voltage rating relates to the ability of the fuse to function and extinguish internal arc when it open. So these things are very clear. Current rating means current rating is the current it can carry for a definite time periods without opening current. And voltage rating is related to the ability of the fuse to extinguish internal arc when it opens. That's important of it. So breaking capacity is how large a short circuit or a fault current the fuse can interrupt or stop safely without allowing a continuing arc and without damaging the fuse body or fuse holder. Okay, so fuse ratings are current, and voltage, and breaking capacities, or we can say interrupt capabilities. current rating of a fuse is a value expressed in amperes that represents the current the fuse will allow without opening. Voltage rating indicates the ability of the fuse to quickly extinguish the arc after the fuse element melt, and maximum voltage the maximum voltage the fuse open fuse will block. So this is about current and voltage rating difference. So voltage rating indicates ability to quickly extinguish the arc and the fuse element after the fuse element melt. So after the fuse element melt, you can get an arc because of this inductive type low elements, you can get an arc. So voltage rating indicates the ability of the fuse to quickly extinguish the arc. Higher the voltage, electrode gap is too much. So there is no chance of the arc cannot reignite again, because that is the reasons when you use a low voltage fuse, the gap is less. So there can be again one more arc when the fuse is, when the current is interrupted, but there can be an arc. Okay, so this is the difference between current and voltage rating of a fuse. So there are a lot of type of fuses. You'll find AC fuse and DC fuse. In this itself, you have like cartridge type fuses, automotive type fuses, resettable type fuses, semiconductor fuses, over voltage suppression fuses. See, like cartridge fuse you'll find everywhere, like it is like in a glass type fuse. It is like with a glass, you can see the element through inside. And automotive type fuse means it is like a 2 pins. This type fuse on board you'll find generally like in the light boards and all, because light board, the battery charger, etc. You'll find this type fuses. And there is a resettable fuses also. I'll show you this. You see, this is a cartridge fuse. So on this fuse you see here, you have to see, you can see the voltage here. It will mention the voltage 250 volt. It will mention the amps. So all these parameters you can see on this. Okay, so this is the most common type of fuse. The fuse element is encased in a glass envelope that is terminated by a metal caps. The fuse is placed in an appropriate holder. Since glass envelope is clear, it is easy to visually determine if the fuse is blown. This is called the automotive type fuses. This is also fuse. So you can check this fuses with the multimeter. If you put in the continuity mode between these two, you can see whether it is open or closed. And it is like a pluggable type. You can just remove it and you can change it. So it is pushed in. So this is used in the light boards and all. You will find in the light board charger circuits and all. You will find this. See, it is run up to 32 volt. Normally light board chargers are 42 volt. 42 volt are the chargers. So they come in blade form. It's called blade type fuses. This is a resettable type fuses. Now the advantage of that once it will automatically reset itself. So these fuses are self-resetting. They contain like carbon black particles embedded in an organic polymers. Normally the carbon black makes the mixture conductive. So when a large current flows, the heat is generated, which will expand this polymer which is inside. And these carbon black particles are forced apart and conductivity decreases to a point where no current will flow. That's the way it cuts off. And it is again restored when the temperature decreases. So thus the fuse does not have a physically, you don't have to replace it. This kind of fuse is also called PTC, that is positive temperature coefficient type. And meaning positive temperature coefficient means resistance increases with the temperature. So PTC and NTC like negative temperature coefficient, positive temperature coefficient. So this, when the temperature exceeds, it will just cut off. And when the temperature reduces, it will reset automatic. So this is a resettable type fuses or called polyfuses. This type fuse you must have seen on board ship. This has got an indicator also on top. Whenever the fuse is blown, there's a plunger like this on top, it will come out. So you can see this, this is to take out this fuse with a fuse puller. It has to be, the fuse puller has to be pushed inside and it will connect here and we can take out this. This is called HRC fuse. It's a high voltage type fuses, high rupture current fuses. HRC fuses are cartridge type fuses consisting of a transparent envelope made up of stellite or magnesium silicate. The fuse is filled with quartz powder, okay, and that acts as an arc extinguishing agent which is inside. They are used for high fault currents. So this classification of fuses, there are, if you come to this classification, it's called non-current limiting type and current limiting type, okay? So non-current limiting type is called explosion type. Explosion type means it is like, it has got a bending type. Explosion fuse is a bended fuse in which explosion effect of the gas produced by the internal arcing, either alone or aided by another mechanism, results in current interruption. So this is interrupting the current in this way. The fuse is not current limiting. As a result, it limits duration of the fault on the electrical system. It's not the magnitude. Means this type fuses are used where explosion gases cause no problem. Basically, we don't use this type of fuses on board ship. It is used in the shore with the high tension lines, and all they use this type of fuses. So these gases cause no problem such as overhead circuits and equipments. And these fuses can be termed as a current awaiting type. And the function of interrupting is similar to an AC circuit breaker. When the temperature of the arc is order of 4000 to 5000 K, at this temperature, special materials located close proximity to the fuse will rapidly create gases. And this gas will generating materials like fiber, melanin, boric acid. There are different type of materials. And this gas will create a high pressure turbulent media around the arc. And when the current does reach the zero, the arc channel reduces to the minimum. This is the way how it is extinguishing this arc because of this, which is gas which is inside. So this is called explosion type. That is known as explosion type. And another one is this vacuum type. Vacuum means it is just vacuum inside. It is a explosive fuse, but still current zero awaiting type because of the dielectric. The vacuum dielectric, the dielectric properties of the vacuums are much more than the air. So this dielectric property of this vacuum, dielectric property will be very high, and it interrupts the arc. So the main difference is that it's completely sealed unit and no explosion action. Vacuum fuses are totally sealed, and interruption occurs because of the rapid dielectric buildup that occurs in the vacuum after the current zero is reached. So this is another type of fuse. It's a vacuum fuse. Means inside is a vacuum. As you have seen, like vacuum circuit breakers and all, it's 10 raised to -4. So it's a dielectric property is very high in case of vacuum, much more than the air. So this is the way it interrupts the current by having a higher vacuum. Because you see the current needs it's got a flow of electrons. So when it becomes vacuum, the flow of electrons are reduced. The other one is the current limiting type fuse. This is a current limiting fuse is a fuse when the current responsive element is melted. Suppose the element which inside gets melted by a current within the fuse specified current limiting range, it abruptly introduces a high resistance to reduce the current magnitude and duration, resulting in a subsequent current interruption. Now in this case, the fuse element is very long. The fuse element is very long, and this element is completely surrounded by a filler material. Now the filler material here is sand filled. This is inside is a sand filled, typically like silica sand, and the arc was, and to contain the arc as well as maintain a high pressure inside the long resisted arc area caused by practically simultaneous melting of the full length of the element. This then allows the fuse to produce a very high resistance in the circuit in a short period of time. So here, this current limiting fuse is that when the current responsive element is melted by a current within the fuse specified current limiting range, it will introduce a high resistance to reduce the current magnitude and duration, resulting in a subsequent current interruptions. So this is being filled with a material called silica sand, which is inside. Most of the fuses you can see when you open, when you break this, you can see it's a side like a sand material which is coming out. So the whole purpose of this sand material is that to create a more resistance inside. Then this fuse can be classified by the domain of applications. It can be power class or distribution class. You see, power fuses are tested to TRVs. This TRV means it's basically the voltage, that appears across the terminals after the current interruption. So power fuses are tested to TRV. That means TRV is the terminal recovery voltage. Terminal recovery voltage. That means once the current is interrupted, how much voltage is going to be across this? You see the fuse is melted, but how much voltage is going to come? The voltage will be very high. The current is interrupted. There will be a potential still there. So that power fuses are tested to TRV, terminal recovery voltage. Okay, that means the voltage that appears across the terminals after the current interruption, that is called TRV, terminal recovery voltage. And the power fuses are tested to this voltage. We have to test, that is power fuses means which we are using in the power supplies and all, has to be tested with a terminal recovery voltage and X by R ratios. X by R ratios means X by R ratio, it is determining the peak asymmetrical fault current. Okay, X stands for reactance, R stands for resistance. So as you know, like yesterday we have discussed about symmetrical current and asymmetrical current. Symmetrical current means it's only the DC component. Asymmetrical means it's a AC component. So in case of this XR values, it is to determine the peak asymmetrical fault current. What will be the maximum asymmetrical current? That's AC current, because AC is only having reactance and resistance. So XR values more likely to be encountered in or near the generation station or substation phase circuits. Then there is another one fuse, the high voltage fuse. It's a liquid type HRV fuse. So the liquid type HRV fuse is most commonly used in high voltage circuit. It is used for the transformer protection or for the circuit having a rating higher than 400 amps. The fuse has a glass tube which fills with carbon tetrachloride. The fuse element places inside a glass tube. The one end of the tube is sealed and the other fixed at the end of the glass tube by help of a phosphorus bronze wire. So high voltage, you have cylindrical type cartridge fuses. We have liquid fuses. These liquid fuses we are not using on board ship. We have all cartridge fuses. Cylindrical type cartridge fuses we are using on board ship. This may be using in some substations and all. It's HV, HRV, HRC fuse. Okay, so this is the fuses, and then we will we'll go to some other slides. Next slide is. So we'll see some few high voltage, some definitions of the high voltage before we go to the next topic, which I want to discuss with these things before we go to the next topic. Okay, there are few definitions in the high voltage. We'll just go through each one of them. We will discuss each things. And first one is the additional earth. Okay, definitions. Additional earth means an earth connection applied to an apparatus after application of a circuit main earth. See, as last class we decided about two type of earthing system. One is circuit earth and the circuit main earthing, like normally applied a point of the work if it is not already with the circuit main earth. Additional earth means, you see, some of the circuit breakers for a generator, when you take out the circuit breaker, the breaker itself has got an earthing switch. Okay, so we don't need any additional earth in that case. So only once the breaker is racked out, we make the earth switch on. So all the residual voltage which is in the line from the generator till the breaker, that means the incoming part of the breaker will be grounded. So any residual voltage which is in the line will be discharged to the earth. But if you need the bus bar, if you want to work on the switchboard bus bar side, there is no earthing switch. So you have to use an additional earth. For that, you have some additional earthing cables. These cables has to be connected from the safe one earth point to the bus bar. That becomes an additional earth. Okay. Additional earth means an earth connection applied to the apparatus after application of a circuit main earth, normally applied at the point of work. So you are applying an additional earth. This is an additional earth point. Approved means a system, a type of form sanctioned by the use by the superintendent or senior electrical engineer. Approved, anything approved, like permit to work, you know. So it is being approved. Permit to work, permit to test, it is approved. So authorized person has to approve. Then he give the permit work to the competent person. So it is like approved. Authorized person means an authorized person is appropriately trained and to be appointed in writing by the superintendent oblique electrical engineer to carry out work as permitted by these rules. So authorized person means he is the ultimate person to decide. He has to maintain the high voltage systems, logs and everything. He is the final person. So he authorizes the competent person to commence work. So authorized person means he is properly trained and appointed in writing by the superintendent of the company. So you can say authorized persons on board ship will be chief engineer. So he is being authorized by the company superintendent that any work on the high voltage systems has to be approved. So chief engineer, he has to supervise, he has to keep the logs, and he has to give an approval to commence the work on the high voltage systems. And competent person is a person who is going to work on that, whether it is working or whether it is maintenance or whether it is repair, etc. Yes? Ele, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. So this additional earthing, we use this additional earthing when we are making earthing test, or always we have to use this?
Yeah, you see this additional earth, I'll take few examples. Okay, like when you are doing a Megger test, when you are doing a Megger test of a motor, or let's say Megger test of a generator, when you want to do a Megger test of a generator stator winding, so what we do, we take the breaker out, and breaker has got a earth switch on that. So you make that earth switch made. That means by making the earth switch on the breaker, till the generator part, everything is grounded. Okay. Now, if you want to work on the switchboard, some part, you don't have any, you don't have any earth switch in that. So that by switching, you can make an ground. There you need an additional earth. So you can make an additional earth connections. An earth connection applied to the apparatus after application of a circuit main earth. So you can put an additional earth if you want. By using a portable cables, you can make an additional earth. That is why in high voltage ships, you will find a lot of these portable earthing cables. So wherever you want to need an additional earth, you can use this. Okay. So additional means an earth connection applied to an apparatus after application of a circuit main earth. So you have made this breaker switch earth and you want to work somewhere else. So you suspect that there can be some like residual voltage or something, you can use an additional earth. Additional earth means in addition to the main switchboard breaker earth, you can make some bus bar you want to work, you can ground the bus bar. So it's like an additional earth. Caution notice means a notice conveying in warning against interference. I will show you this additional earth, and the when we do the practicals, we have to make this two type of earthing, like one on this breaker, then we make an additional earth using a portable earthing cables. So I will show you in practical how we make this additional earth, like especially bus bar earthing. It's an additional, in additional to the main earth or circuit earth, you can say. Caution notice is just a notice warning that interference with apparatus to which it is attached. Charge means item has acquired a charge either because it is live or because it becomes charged by other means. You see, charge means when you apply a Megger, okay, when you are doing a Megger test, suppose you are using a, let's say 500 volt Megger or a 5000 volt measure. Whenever you measure it up, you see there are some residual charges in that. That is why after you measure up any instrument, whether it is motor or whatever you measure it up, you need to discharge the residual charges. Normally this has to be done. Why? Because suppose you measure it up a motor and you disconnect the cables and you touch the winding part, you can get a shock because of the residual voltage which is there. Okay, so charge means because of this capacitance effect, it will have some charge, it will gain. So anything which is live, even if you switch off the power supply, there can be some residual charges. When you measure up, when you take out the measure, still there can be some residual charges. This all has to be discharged to the ground. So the item has acquired a charge either because it is live or it has become charged by other means, such as a static or induction charging, or regained gained due to the capacitance effect, even though it may be disconnected from the rest of the system. So this is called charge. So charge can be whether it is live or when you do a measure test, or it can retain some charge. This has to be discharged to the ground. So that is the reasons, like when you are working on any 440 volt or whether it is 6600 volt, even if you switch off the breaker, everything, there are some residual charges in that. This has to be discharged to the ground. That's what we are using these grounding cables. Okay. Then circuit main earth. An earth connection applied for the purpose of making apparatus safe to work on before a permit to work or sanction for test is issued. You see, before you make this, once you get the permit to work form in your hand, you have to make this grounding and discharge it. And then you have to make an entry in the permit to work that yes, this has been grounded. So this circuit main earth means earth connection applied for the purpose of making an apparatus safe to work before permit to work or sanction to test is issued. So permit to work is issued only after you make the earth connections. And competent person means the person who has the sufficient technical knowledge or experience enable him to avoid danger, and it is authorized by the duty of the authorized person issues a permit to work covered by these rules to satisfy himself that persons are competent to carry out the work. So competent person is the person who is working, and he is being authorized by the authorized person. That authorized person decides who should work. So that's a competent person. Okay. So authorized persons issuing a permit to work to a competent person. And competent person also cannot work alone on high voltage. You should have a standby person. So there should be two people whenever you work on high voltage on board ship. So let's take an example. Authorized person is chief engineer. Competent person is, let's say, ETO or first engineer. So chief engineer authorizes competent person to carry out the work. It is the duty of the authorized person to ensure that proper isolation, proper grounding, all things are completed prior he issues the permit work to the competent person. Danger notice, a notice calling attention to the danger of approach or interference with apparatus to which it is attached. Dead means at or about zero voltage and disconnected from all source of electrical energy. So once you make a system, isolate the system, you make the grounding, you use the high voltage probe again to check that it is zero voltage. There is no voltage on the system. Designated competent person is also in some industries known as authorized person or senior. Okay, this will not go because we have only authorized person and competent person. Disconnected equipment that is not connected to any source of electrical energy. Earth means connected to a general mass of earth in such a manner as will ensure all the times an immediate discharge of the electrical energy without danger. High voltage means voltage exceeding 1000 volt is called the high voltage. Okay, high voltage apparatus means it is the power generation equipment. See, if you see high voltage equipment means starting from generator, then transformer, then switchboard, then motors, etc. all comes under high voltage equipment. And there are some high voltage produced on board ship, like 440 volt ships also got like both thrusters, other radar is also producing boiler like ignition transformers. You see ignition transformer is also 11,000 volt, or some of them maybe more. So you cannot classify those things to high voltage. Okay, high voltage means generation and distribution, power generation from high voltage, power distribution from high voltage. Isolated means the disconnection and separation of the electrical equipment. So first is the isolation. First is disconnection and separation. So switching off, isolation, and grounding. Disconnection and separation of the electrical equipment from every source of electrical energy in such a way that the disconnection and separation is secure. Key safe. Key safe means a device for secure retention of keys used to lock means of isolations or earthing or safety switches. That is called key safe. Okay, so there are keys used for isolation also. There are keys used for earthing also. So there are key like when you make a system isolated, you have a key. You have to lock it with that key. When you make an earthing, you have to make a key. So these keys are withdrawable. So once you take the key out, so nobody can remove the earthing. So unless you don't put back the key, then only the earthing can be removed. So this is called key safe. Limited access, a form issued by authorized persons to competent person defining limits of work to be carried out in the vicinity, but not on high voltage electrical apparatus. So what are the limits of work to be carried out? That's a limitation to the access. Live work on work or near conductors that is accessible and live or charged. You see, live work means 440 systems, you can still work live. If you want to work live also, there are procedures, there are permits for that to work. But in high voltage, live working is not allowed. Lockout and tag out. See, lockout and tag out. It refers to specific practices and procedures to safeguard employees from unexpected energization or startup of machinery and equipment or release of hazardous energy during service or maintenance activity. See, lockout and tag out, I'll show you. See, this is lockout and tag out. Now here you see, one is lockout, one is tag out. Lockout devices are designed to keep energy isolating devices in a safe or off position. Means lockout means you have lockout. Lockout devices are designed to keep the energy isolating device in safe or off positions. So it cannot become re-energized, means it cannot become energized, preventing the machines or equipment from becoming energized. That is called lockout. Then you have tag out. Tag out are the warning tags. So this together we call lockout and tag out. So these devices cannot be removed without the key or other verified unlocking mechanisms. Now you see, this is the starter breaker handle. Now the breaker is switched off, and the breaker is switched off, and this lock is put in this. So unless this lock is, you see the lock here, this red padlock, unless this lock is removed, then only you can activate this breaker. You can switch on this. So the person who switched off this, he put the lock and he took the key away. The key is with him. So he can only open the lock, switch on the breaker. And also he has put the tags on this. He has to mention on these tags his name. His name is there. His name is there, and what job he is doing it, and what is the time and what is the date. This has to be specified on this tag. So it is tag out devices are warning tags attached to an energy isolating device to warn the employees, that it gives a warning to others that not to turn or re-energize the machine. And tag out devices are easier to remove and provide less protection. It is best practice to use the two together. That means you must use a lockout and tag out. Okay, this is what lockout and tag out. It is applicable to everywhere. Like if you are doing a Megger test of a motor, or you are removing a pump of a motor. Suppose, let's say you are removing a pump of a low boil pump from the engine room bottom floor. So your starter is in the switchboard or maybe on the lower platform. So you have to switch off the starter and put a lock and put a tag. and also put all the local remote switches to local, and that is called lockout tagout. Okay, lockout and tagout. So permit to work means it's a declaration form signed by an authorized person. Authorized person is the finally he will sign the permit to work and he'll give to the competent person in charge of the work. So to be carried out or in the close proximity of high voltage apparatus. So making him known to him the extent of the work. So the permit work should say what is the extent of the work, exactly what apparatus is dead, yeah, what is isolated from the live conductors, and what are the methods like it is being discharged, earth, all these things has to be mentioned in the permit to work. Okay, this is permit to work system. I will show you in the next class a permit to work form. Also, I will show you a risk assessment form also. What are the concepts of making risk assessment and how a permit to work looks like, that I will show you in the next class, because the next coming class we have how to fill up this form, etc. coming up. Safety lock, a lock used to secure points of isolations. Okay, safety lock, there can be two type of colors of lock which we are using on board ship. One is a red type locks and the yellow type locks. Okay, this I will show you here. You see, this is an individual lockout. That means only one person is working. He can locks like this, red lock. You switch off the breaker and lock it. So here, plan, isolate, lockout, permit to use, work, single lockout. It's a single lockout. But if you go for this one, this is a multiple lockout. So multiple lockout, we are using yellow. Yellow locks are using for multiple or group locking. So it is kept in a box like this. You see, I'll show you here. You see, this is a group locking. That means one equipment, there are 4 people working. So it's called group locking. All the 4 can lock. Means one person is working, let's say walls, some walls are locked, some starters are locked. It's called a group locking. So here we are using yellow locks. The yellow standard safety lock is used where there is more than one point of isolation also. So there we are using yellow type locks. Okay. Yellow and red, these are the 2 colors which is used on board ship. Red is for individual locking, yellow is for group locking. Safety lock sanctioned, then also sanctioned for testing, like say, permit to work, same like this testing. If you want to test an equipment for high voltage equipment, then you should have a sanction for test. So it is a form of declaration signed and given by the authorized person to another person in charge of the testing high voltage apparatus, making known to the recipient that what apparatus is to be tested and conditions under which the testing is to be carried out. So it has to be specified in that. This is called sanction to test. This we have finished. Okay, so this is the individual locking. This is the group locking. Then trapped key and keep safety system. This trapped key and keep safety system is, you see the simple terms. If you see a trap key, you see here, this is called trap key and key safety system. And this diagram is shown here. It's a switchboard. You see all the keys are interrelated. That means first you finish this lock, then you finish this, then you finish this, then you finish this, finish this. Finally, you can take out this key only once you complete all these things. So this is calling a trap key system. Okay. So where we use this, let's say if you want to take out a breaker, just one example, like take out a breaker, isolate the breaker, there is one key, make the grounding switch, second key, cabinet key. So it goes on like that. So the last final key is here to open the front cover. So it is something like that. It's called a trap key and a key safety system. So there are many conditions has to be filled. All these interlocking systems have to be fulfilled. Then only you can remove this key, the final key. So it's a trap key. This key is trapped here. Once you finish all these conditions, you can remove this key. Okay, that is called trap key and key safe system. So trap key and key safe system, this is an approved device for secured retention of all the keys used as means of isolation, like earthing and all safety devices in accordance with the safety rules. Issue of a permit declaration is that the said equipment is safe to work by virtue of isolation and earthing. The purpose is to ensure that the safety precautions taken and declared on the permit to work or sanction to test cannot be altered while competent personnel are operating. So this is the trap key system. Other all interlocks has to be fulfilled, then only the final key can be removed. Okay. So once you complete these keys only, this key, like mainly it is for the switchboard propulsion systems and all, you have a lot of keys like this. So once you finish this, then you finish second step, third step, fourth, fifth, then you remove this key, then finally you remove this key. So it goes in like this. See this key, there's one key interlock system. So I will show you one small one. You see, it's a key interlock in front of in front door of a circuit breaker. So this is the front side of a circuit breaker. First key is called 1K1 to lock VCB in out positions. So 1K1 is this. Lock to draw CB out in. To lock the VCB in out position. This key. And number 2 key, this key is only available for having completed procedure A. That means once you take out this breaker, you lock out this breaker, then this key can be, you can remove this key. To lock the VCB in out positions, then you can take out this key. Now you cannot take out this key unless you don't complete this circuit. So once you finish this, then you have 1K2. This key is only available for having completed the procedure A, and 1K3 is the earthing switch can be locked in on positions. Lock for earthing switch operation. This is the last key. That means you take out this breaker, you take the breaker out, then you remove the key, then you put the key here. Put the key here, then you make the earth switch. Once you make the earth switch, then this key you can take out. So what it shows that unless you don't rack out the breaker, you cannot make this earth switch. Because if you make the earth switch without taking this breaker out, you will ground the whole bus bar. So you don't want to do that. So you rack out the breaker from here, take this key, put the key here. When you turn the key, you can enable this earthing switch can be made. And when the earthing switch is made, you take out this key. So this key is with you in your custody. So unless you don't put this key here, you cannot make the earthing switch back to normal. So once you finish your work only, you can put the key here, make the earthing switch off, then put the key here. So that this key can be removed. Once you remove this key, then you can put the breaker back. So it goes in like that in sequence. So this is the key interlock systems. This iso-locking systems, all the access doors to each room, all the access doors to each switchboard, switch room and enclosure containing high voltage electrical equipment must be kept securely locked when unattended. Okay, so there are some general precautions. These are the general precautions for high voltage. One is security and admission to substations. It is actually security and admission to switchboard rooms. So like each switchboard room and enclosure containing high voltage electrical room must be securely locked. So on board ship, you'll find high voltage compartments are generally locked. It is not left open, it has to be locked. So this is one thing, security and admittance to switchboard rooms. Then operational keys. Operational key means authorized person should be issued with a personal key to enable them gain access to all the switchboards and also key to the key cabinet. Second thing, key plate system. Key plate system means there should be one key for each lock provided for locking high voltage switchgear. So the key for lock is not open. The key for lock is not open any other locks provided them. So these are the general precautions. Key cabinets. Then key cabinets means where you keep the key, lockable documents cabinets, key box, mimic diagram. Mimic diagram means it is basically the mimic diagram should all times it should reflect the current operational state of the system it represents. Okay. that means it should be permanently installed in a same room as a working by the cabinet. And it is basically high voltage, diagrams, etc. This mimic diagram. Then safety locks. Safety locks, I told you, like it should be like padlocks. Generally, you have two colors, red and yellow colors. Red is for individual locking, yellow for group locking. Then safety key boxes. So these are the general precautions. You see, there's another called ISO locking system. You see, this is called, this is a padlock, this is an ISO lock system. ISO lock system means this is the key which is here. The key is here. You can see one key here. It's a multicast when used in conjunction with SFC padlocks. Enable individual personnel to isolate the equipments while they carry out the work. Safe in the knowledge that the equipment cannot be re-energized until all the padlocks have been removed from the place. So unless all the padlocks are not removed, you cannot remove this master key, this key from here. So this is used to the same effect that it requires release of a unique padlock. This unique padlocks has to be removed before the suit key, this key can be removed. So the key for such unique padlock being the position of the recipient until the permit to work is cleared. So he is the last person. Once he clears the permit work, only he can remove the key till the time it is locked. So this key will be with normally this key will be with the authorized person. This will be with the permit to work person, that is means competent person. So there are two keys. Unless this person removes this key, this lock and this, then only this key can be removed. And this key is used for all the isolations. So it is called an ISO lock position. So two people, competent persons and authorized persons. Authorized person release this key, competent person release this key, then he can take this key and remove all the isolations. Okay, this is called locking requirements, ISO lock systems.
Sir,
Yes.
I don't understand this one. Explain again about this. The key and the lock.
This one?
Yes, this one. How to remove the key? It is chain locked, right?
Yes, this key is in between this. This key is put in this ISO lock systems. So it is like a, it can be removed in two pieces, like you can remove this one off. A unique lock will be fitted to ISO lock. The key of the which will be issued to the recipient of the permit to work or sanctioned for test at the time of the issue for the duration of the work and returned when permit to work or sanction for test is cancelled. Now here, this key is with two people. Either this will be with authorized persons and this will be with the competent person. And this basically here is that the key is being secured by two people. This arrangement is like this. The key is being secured by two people. Unless they don't release these two locks, you cannot take out this master key from this. So here it is used to same effect that it requires release of unique padlock. Unique padlock is this one before the suit key can be released. This key can be released. The key for that unique padlock being the position of the recipient until the permit to work is cleared. So this one is having, unless you cannot take out this key, unless these two people agrees that, okay, he says, I finished my work, and authorizing person says, okay, now work is completed, you can release this key. So it is a locking system so that this key, nobody can take this key away, unless these two people agree this. It is made in such a way that this cannot be this, from the photo, you will not be able to look it. I'll show you in my lab, this, how it is being secured up this one, this key. Okay, so these two are the additional locks. One key will be with authorized person, one will be with the permit work holder or a competent person. Unless they finalize that, yes, now we can release the key for opening all these isolations, they can remove the key, the suit key. Okay. So group locking is, I told you, like group locking means, so it can be two ways. Like if three people are working, like say one engineer is working, two engineers are working and one electrical is working, three people, that become a group locking and they all are working on the same systems. So each one of them puts a lock here. And by mistake, it should not be that one person finishes his work, he energizes it. That is why this group locking is provided. Okay, like suppose you are working on the, one engineer is working on the generator side, and the electrical person is taking a, let's say, air gap of a generator. So once he finishes the work, he releases all the safety locks. So there can be some danger. That is why these group locking systems are provided. It's also used in such cases like when you're working multiple locks on a single system, then also it can be used. So this yellow standard safety lock is used when there is more than one point of isolation, also it can be used. So after securing the isolation using yellow standard safety locks, the keys are placed in a group lock box that is secured using a red personal safety lock. You see, after you put all these keys inside, these all keys belongs to yellow lock, and it is locked finally by the red locks. Again, the individual retains the key. Now, for the work on HV equipment, both the permit issuer, permit holder secure the group lockout box with red personal safety locks and retain their keys. This is called the lockout stations. You'll find on board ship, this is here you have all the type of locks. So you have these ISO locks are here, and you have the yellow locks are here. This for group locking. And then you have the red locks. You can see the red locks are here. This is for the individual locking. You have the tags, different type of tags are there to make the indications. Okay, so this is called the lockout stations. So this is main purpose is that you see this one is for all breaker locking. Whenever you want to lock the breakers, there are different sizes in this. Small breakers, this one is small breaker, bigger breaker, etc. So conclusion is that sequence of isolation, the first is plan the job. That includes prove the equipment dead, switch off, prove the equipment dead, then isolate, lockout for life, permit issued. Once permit issued, work to de-isolate. Work, then de-isolate, permit to test and prove safe, put in service. So the sequence goes like this. Okay. See the high voltage fuses. So this is a cylindrical type fuse which is used in the high voltage, and this I think that's what things are covered. This is I think okay one. So as I told you, the fuse, the main things are the current ratings and the voltage ratings and the interrupting capacities. Okay. So the voltage rating determines the amount of the space or the air gap left after the fuse opened and interrupted the flow of the current. So higher the voltage rating means larger the resulting gap. And there will be a larger resulting gap when the fuse open, and wider gap, the lesser chances of sustaining an arc. So it's very important that, as I told you, like current rating can be same, but voltage rating is also important, because voltage rating is directly because of the arc. You know, if the voltage rating is less, means the electrode gaps are very less. It can uh, it can cause a reignition, means like the arc can again re-establish because of the inductive nature of the load. Okay, so fuse refers to the device that opens a circuit with the fusible part, which is heated and severed by the current flowing. And it is called inverse current characteristic. Why it is called inverse melting characteristic? Because as we know, like when overcurrent is small, the magnitude, it is in small magnitude overcurrent, so rate of heat generated is also very low. So temperature of the element increases gradually, but as the current increases, melting time will reduce. When the melting time reduces because of the power absorption, the melting time will reduce at a rate which is more than the expected rate. So because of the heat which is generated in the reduced cross section or center of the element, and that cannot be removed as fast it is produced, this gives a fuse a very inverse characteristic. Okay, I hope you clear what is this inverse characteristic. As the magnitude of the current increases, the melting time reduces. So larger the magnitude of the current, that will lead to higher power absorptions, okay, in the fuse, and faster rise in the temperature. So melting time of the fuse should be inversely proportional to the magnitude of the square of the current. So that is called inverse characteristic or inverse melting characteristic. So it is, the fuses are characterized by one is thermal and the voltage. So thermal means it is current ratings and melting characteristic. Another one is the voltage ratings and interrupting characteristic.
Sir, enough for today?
Yeah, okay. So we'll see in the next class, we have switching and isolation procedures and insulation
But
resistance
sir,
monitoring.
about fuse, you didn't finish.
Fuse, yes. Fuse finished. Anything else you have?
You finished, but
Yeah, which one you want?
deeply about the inverse and the others.
Inverse.
Yes.
Yes, then go to this one and see what is left. HV fuses. Then it's getting going off. Shares. Okay, this fuse, I will put some more slides in the next class. Okay, now already 3:30 now going to be, okay. So we'll discuss. So in the fuse also,
Okay,
in
next
this slide,
class we discuss.
yeah, if you want anything more, I think because in the first class also we have seen like circuit breaker fuse difference. We can put some practical applications on the fuse in the coming class. I will put few slides, practical applications. So like onboard ship, what are the practical applications of the fuses, how you change the fuses, what is the voltage and current ratings, etc. I'll put in the next class in the revisions, okay? Okay, gentlemen, then thank you for today.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good night.
Right.
Thank you, sir. See you.